Hello, I'm Coach Ty, and today we're talking about creating a culture of success and safety for young people. We have on our guest list today a very esteemed person. I'm so happy that he's here. His name is Mr. Mike Barrett, and he's a former administrator of a pretty prominent school, several prominent schools, and he's currently a business owner, has been for a very successful business for a couple of years. We're going to speak primarily about his experience as an educator and working in education and one of the foreboding issues of today, sexual predators in our schools and our colleges and universities. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Coach.
Mike, we talked a long time today, had very good conversation. And just like for you to go into the details of the situation that occurred, that you had to make a very important hire
Yes.
for a very prominent school, and they're probably paying about how much in tuition to parents?
$20 to $25,000 a year.
Yeah, so this is pretty serious in terms of the types of parents, and you're working with a board of trustees. So take me back to that moment.
Great. When it was a school where I was the lead administrator, school down south in Florida, and there was a very important hire that we had to make.
And this is a high school.
It was a high school, and if you're familiar with high-level math, sort of hiring people for high-level math is a difficult thing to do in schools because it's not a skill set that is within every math teacher's repertoire. So we had to find a BC calculus teacher. Due to a tragedy in the school, there was an opening that came up in the summertime, which is not the ideal time to find the highest quality niche teachers because they're typically ensconced in their own schools.
Mhm.
So we had to go through a search entity that we paid a pretty prominent search entity that we had to pay a lot of money to. Their job was to vet and to bring us top quality candidates. So we trusted them to bring us candidates, and that was not typical for a school to invest that type of money in a hire. It's usually done the old-fashioned way. But nonetheless, it was proposed to us that all the vetting was done ahead of time, and that it was our job just to find and hire the candidates. So we had the luxury of just relying on them doing the hard work.
So let me get this right. You're in a crunch.
We're in a crunch.
Many of the teachers that are working somewhere else, they're under contract, and so there's not a lot of people available. So you go out and hire this search firm who's supposed to dot all the I's and cross the T's. You paid them about $35,000, and what'd you get?
We received a candidate who was top drawer in terms of his academic excellence and his history of executing, running phenomenal classes, having phenomenal results, getting all the professional accolades. He was a master teacher who actually taught other teachers on how to teach BC calculus. So his curriculum, his resume was as impressive as this school could find.
Okay.
And it was coupled with the fact that it was coming already vetted. So and we were in crisis mode to hire somebody. So on the surface, this was, in essence, too good to be true.
Yes.
And there were certain things along the way where my experience in working in schools and my experience of school knowledge and there were some things that came along that just didn't seem right. And
Talk to me about some of those things that you picked up on. And the reason why we're talking about this and talking to Mike Barrett about this, many times predators, they're not hiding behind bushes, they're in plain view. And so give credit to Mr. Barrett. He was able to identify some things earlier on. My hope is that you learn from. Go ahead, Mike.
so along the way, in my journey of trying to determine whether there was more there than what was on the surface, was on the one hand we were very excited about our problem was solved. We were going to bring an ace in who was going to tell the community we had now had a ace teacher. But there were a couple of things where my knowledge of education and the rhythm of the way schools work and being deeply immersed in all of that just didn't seem right. Number one, this individual was coming from a prominent school. Why was he leaving that prominent school? there was an answer, there was an official answer, but still that fundamental dimension just didn't seem right. Why would he want to come to our school and leave this other school? The second was he had left the school halfway through the previous year. That's a disruptive narrative, so why would somebody do that? And he was very eager to get the job, and
Yes.
which the thing that when I reflect on it, those are very easy things to dismiss. Number one, he wanted the job because he wanted to. This was a school in a nicer climate. He wanted to come to that. It'd be very easy for me to check that off. Number two, he had left the school, and the official narrative was he went to assist with a mother who was ill. Completely acceptable answer. And number three, the school endorsed him, that he'd gotten very good recommendations. But it's still just relying on the collective experience of saying, you know, this just doesn't seem right. There were some other dimensions along the way, some of my conversations with him. And instead of dismissing those, I paid attention to them. And if I'm proud of anything in that thing, it's that they were hunches. I wasn't going to do anything bad to this individual. I wasn't going to cast aspersions. I was just going to investigate it a little further.
So tell us, how did you investigate? How did you follow up on your gut feeling?
It was sort of like peeling an onion. I started with just the official people who brought me the individual. And at the same time, there was enormous pressure on me to hire this guy because the Board of Trustees was excited about him. My colleagues, administrative colleagues, were excited about him. So I went back to the hiring authority, or the entity that brought him there, and they dismissed all of my concerns with official answers. I went back to the school itself. I called the acting head of the school, whose time at the school didn't really coincide with this individual. He was kind of new. He had come in mid-year the previous year. So I thought his answer was a little flimsy, not in the way that, so I called the official of the school to find out. And then that led me to two additional things that I did to try to find it. And it was
And what were they?
one was, he was in the math department. So the school was in session. It was the very beginning of sort of the school year. It was late August. I called into the math department, and they literally passed the phone around, and they proclaimed what a phenomenal guy it was, and how sad it was that he had to leave mid-year the previous year. And I'm sure to this day, I believe they were being honest, that they were not. That was the story that was true to them. That was what was told to them. And I could have ended there, but I don't know why. Part of it was, I think, just didn't sit right, and I didn't want to dismiss that.
And so what was your next step?
So then I was sitting at my desk in the afternoon, and I decided that my knowledge of how schools work, I said, who would really know the story here? So at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or 4:30 in the afternoon, I picked up the phone. I called the headmaster's secretary, because I figure everything that goes on in a school passes her desk. It's always, if you want to know, go to some of the folks who see everything. So I called the secretary of the head of the school, and I asked her how long she had been at the school, and she said that she had been at the school 25 years. I figured, okay, she knows a lot about what's going on in the school. I asked her about this candidate, and if there was anything that she could tell me. And I could tell by that answer that there was an issue. There was that long hesitation, and then I knew something was wrong. I then asked her the question that.
Well, let's back up there, because there's some vital things that you did there, and then we're going to get back to when the shoe really fell for you. You said, how long have you worked here? So you qualified the person that you were asking the question of to get information. And I think that's critical, because you got to rely on or figure out whether or not you're dealing with good sources. You also indicated, which is very true, the most powerful person in any office is the secretary, because everything goes through them.
Mhm.
And so the other thing I think you're leading us to is that when you asked her that question, there was silence. Take it from there.
I knew that there was something there then. And I asked her the question if she could tell me anything. And she said, I cannot tell you anything. Obviously, then I knew there was a bigger problem, or that there was just more there. So I asked her the question, explained to her the situation I was in, and if she were in my situation, would she ever hire him? And she said, absolutely not. And then I asked her, how could I find out what the problem was, and explained to her all the things that I had done, all the ways that this guy had been adorned as quality through and through. And I was up against it because there were formidable powers within the school. I had to report to a board who was excited about hiring him. So I needed to have I needed to have some evidence, or be able to explain why he would be a candidate that we would pass on.
You were in a very tight situation because, as we look at what happened at Penn State, many of the people, they were silent. You got, first of all, parents paying top shelf dollar, which means that you have high profile board. They're probably doctors and lawyers and the top of everything that could really make or break a career. And so tell me how you did find out, how she got you the information, and what was it?
Her heart then went out to me, and she said that I cannot tell you anything, but I will have someone call you. And about 15 minutes later, the phone rang. It was the board, the head of the chairman of the board of that school, who called me and said, flat out, if you tell anybody this story, I'm going to deny it, but here's the story. And this individual was, he had done some bad stuff.
Mhm.
And he was caught, and it was dealt with in a way where it would not create controversy. So he was dismissed. There was a public story. It was buried from the media, and it was no longer their problem.
Mhm. And so what had he done?
He had been arrested running a child prostitution ring using school vehicles. And the children were not the children of this school, which I think is often the case. That it's not that it was foster children from an urban foster home who were the victims. That was all I knew. I mean, I didn't know any details. The board member told me that they had pulled every political piece of power that they had to make sure that this didn't go anywhere. The guy was dismissed. The story was obliterated. It was total damage control.
So they kind of did the Penn State thing.
Correct.
Everybody, say something, but not enough that brings attention to it until you absolutely have to come forward, and that's when there's a leak in the dam.
Exactly. It's crisis management, focusing on the institution, not focusing on the victims.
Well, let's pause there. Let's just get back with the audience, and let's talk about the takeaways that we learned from Mike Barrett today. If you are in the situation, you are an administrator. If you take any cue, read the book from Malcolm Gladwell called Blink, and that really talks about paying attention to the indicators, and that's what Mike did. His gut feeling told him that something was wrong, so he followed up and he framed the question. Why is this person coming in at this period of time? Why is he leaving a very prominent institution where everyone would want to be in that field of private education? And why would he leave mid-year? Even though he had paid for a search firm to vet this person, he realized that the ultimate decision was on him, and if something went wrong, no one would pay attention to the search team. He also paid attention to the people he asked questions of, qualifying them, and then paying attention to silence when people don't talk. Silence is communicating. And then asking the question, well, if you can't tell me, who can? It's imperative that you do this because when we catch a perpetrator, predator, pedophile for the first time, they have victimized on average 32 people and they have no criminal record. And so what Mike did is the steps that all of you need to do. And so I really applaud you, Mike, and thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thanks for letting me share it.